Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Wednesday, February the 11th. In public, there's an uneasy truce now at the top of Labour as we head into the final Prime Minister's questions before the half-term recess. Behind the scenes, some allies of Starmer are taking aim at Wes Streeting. My name is Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates of Sky News. I can't believe it's only Wednesday. Anyway, could we get back just for a few hours to political parties attacking each other rather than attacking themselves? Big question today. It does feel like we're begging for a bit of politics as normal, doesn't it, Anne? On that theme, the new head of Britain's biggest business lobbying group said that the CBI, which he now oversees, would shift tactics to reflect the new multi-party era.
Yes, Cressida Hogg, the incoming chair, said it was necessary for the CBI to engage with both Reform UK, particularly when there's such uncertainty about what that party's policies might actually look like towards business, and the Green Party, which has its record of anti-business stances, including the nationalisations of utility. New outreach from the CBI.
We're putting this at the top of the podcast to remind people that there is more to life in politics than the inter-C9 Labour war, but don't worry, there'll be plenty of that in just a moment. And also on this podcast in a bit, we've got a massive worry from the UK business community, which is completely political, but we just haven't been talking about because of everything else that's been going on. So stay tuned for that. On the incoming chair of the CBI, though, and just before we move on, lots of sensible things from that interview, but there is one very striking detail I can't get over. Hogg, who is also chair of the defence group BAE, refused to have her photograph taken for the FT, partly because she said she had paranoid concerns about managing her security in an era of AI deepfakes and cyber threats. You know, she says, there are lots of ways in which people can try to impersonate me, and there have been enough incidents in defence companies and with colleagues. I wish we didn't have to put the pictures of our board online because of threats. I mean, I did think this was a bit odd. The FT has to use a photograph supplied by the CBI of her, so it's not like her image isn't in the public domain. And you have to do lots of conferences as CBI chair. I'm not going to lie, President of the CBI is a public-facing job, and is this a bit weird?
Yeah, I actually bumped into her last week at this big British-American business reception. She's always been someone who leant back from being a very public figure, although she's risen very far, you know, obviously now to this role, but through various jobs. And she's seen as something, you know, as a sort of mentor and a figure a lot of women who want senior positions on boards look up to. I agree. I think it's going to be quite hard to hold the line on that. And of course, that can be, if you're used to being rather discreet, it can be a bit jarring when you hit the public domain, and particularly in the era of deepfakes. So as you see, that's a really good observation. I don't know where that one will go. I suspect that trying to use one stock picture is not going to work for very long. Anyway, the CBI, like a lot of others, does want to calm things down in Westminster. Good luck with that one. Now, today, there doesn't seem to be any serious business in the chamber beyond those PMQs. And Downing Street effectively controls the business there, suggests the government would be more than happy if MPs weren't in Westminster right now and getting ready to scatter to the four winds. And they, I think, are just trying to stagger through now to the recess and hope that will calm down tensions.
Yeah, I had a drink with an MP yesterday afternoon. He was complaining that he was bored because business finished at 4:30 in the Commons chamber. Yesterday, we asked if, after a coup attempt on Monday, and it was a bit of a coup attempt, wasn't it? Albeit an unsuccessful one, Wes Streeting had painted a target on his back.
Well, that does look prescient, doesn't it? And there are furious denials from Wes Streeting, who even took to social media last night to denounce the Guardian's front page this morning. And the headline, Streeting still ready to challenge Starmer despite show of unity, allies say. Quoting friends of the health secretary saying they expect him to try to challenge Starmer's leadership within weeks, despite him insisting that he backs the Prime Minister and isn't intending to move against him. I guess they were claiming to know Streeting's mind better than he did himself. And he then replied, this is categorically untrue. Now, allies of Wes had told me earlier that whoever was going around saying this was unsanctioned and wrong. And there are reports this morning that Angela Rayner was in touch with Anas Sarwar before his call for Keir Starmer to stand down. I mean, basically, the person who knows the answer to this is Sarwar, though I doubt after that rather bruising rebuff from Cabinet on his coup attempt that he's much in a mood to give it. But, we're always here, Anas.
Absolutely. What I think is definitely true, and obviously we can't totally referee the Guardian front page, but what is definitely true, and I know this, is that allies of the Prime Minister seem more cross with Wes Streeting than ever. Andy Burnham gave a speech yesterday saying, nationalise everything and be more left-wing, and that barely triggered a flicker of a response. But on Wes, look, I think they're irritated by all sorts of things. They picked up on his mealy mouths backing of the Prime Minister, to give Keir a chance line from Monday's Sky interview. And they also said that even friends are trying to convince Wes to calm down, that there's an attempt by Keir's allies to make Wes look a little isolated at the moment, as well as a hothead. Who I think, and this point was made to me, if he can't sort of deal with the forces around him, how on earth is Wes Streeting going to deal with President Putin? We're reaching for those kinds of lines of attack at the moment.
There were claims of indirect barbs also at the political Cabinet yesterday. This podcast was told that a few remarks were indirectly pointed to him about the need for unity, and one source claiming the extent to which Wes has alienated Cabinet colleagues couldn't be overestimated. I would just step back and say these briefings aren't given for altruistic reasons. There is often some self-interest or different alignment there. And someone who speaks more to the position of the Health Secretary called out the briefing, saying this was remarkable. I think these briefings really are getting under Streeting's skin, and he needs to be a little bit careful with that, because it's just a very reactive time. And saying that Wes wasn't mentioned once, except when called on, although you could read that different ways too. If the Prime Minister were that kind of happy with, or others were happy with him, then maybe he would have been sort of more involved in this very political Cabinet, because he is seen to be tactically very adept. So yeah, I think there's definite irritation there. The question is it people sort of trying to kill off a Streeting manoeuvre because they too are a bit paranoid?
Well, here's what I think the big picture is. Look, Keir Starmer is on borrowed time. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But so long as he remains in place, there's a secondary battle going on, and that's to try and nudge Keir Starmer, I think, a bit to the left. And there is an attempt by some people to try and sort of take aim at, if not the sort of Blairite voices, but the voices on the right of the Labour Party that have been in ascendancy when Morgan McSweeney was in charge, and now look like they're a little bit all over the shop. And I think that's what's going on as well. So bullying Wes in the public prints has a couple of motives, leadership and direction right now. There's a really good line in Patrick Maguire's piece in The Times about how on Monday, during that coup attempt, a phalanx of spads turned up in the cabinet room to fight back. Remember, look, you had Tim Allen going, Morgan McSweeney going, Anas Sarwar was about to call for Keir Starmer to quit. Maybe the Welsh Labour leader, Eluned Morgan too, although that ended up not happening. And what Patrick says turned out was that all of these government advisors basically twisted arms and extracted pledges of loyalty from the Cabinet. And we saw that with all those social media messages in the afternoon. I'm told Keir Starmer joined in the ring round too. The reason for highlighting that as well in this context is one wonders, that moment of drama that Downing Street cannot have known that the Prime Minister would survive, what did they offer in return for the pledges of loyalty? There will have been little promises all over the place. Will there be policy? Will there be direction? Will there be influence? All of that kind of thing, I suspect, behind the scenes is on the table, and we'll only really see the consequences of that over the coming weeks and months. And there was one other line from an ally of Keir Starmer that really pricked my ears up, and that was in all the conversation about Wes Streeting. There was just a line, we don't want to do regicide. And I did just listen to that and wonder if there was the tiniest hint there that the alternative to regicide is not Keir Starmer going on and on, but actually that he knows that he could bow out at some point of his own volition. There was just something in the way this person said it that made me think a lot of options are on the table in the medium term. just not yet. But maybe it's just an attempt to rally opposition to Wes Streeting.
Snap, I'm getting the same vibe from that. We don't want to do regicide quote, and actually spoke to someone else brought in a policy role indirectly, not in number 10 in a department by Keir Starmer, at least, with his blessing, who was saying exactly the same thing. It's a kind of thin line of defence, isn't it? Maybe we'll prepare for the king to decide to just spend the rest of his life hunting in the country at the Tudor court. But we don't want to do the regicide. I think that's right. That's the holding pattern. So it just happens that another long-term friend of Streeting was banished yesterday, and that is, of course, the saga of Starmer's former Director of Communications, Matthew Doyle, whose links to a paedophile meant that he was finally suspended just a fortnight after becoming a Labour peer. That's been the subject of a long-running Sunday Times investigation. Gabriel Pogrund first broke that story of Doyle's association with Sean Morton, who would later admit indecent child image offences. Doyle had campaigned for Morton, who was an old friend, a very long-standing friend, even after he changed his plea from innocent to guilty for these offences. So the question there is obviously a terrible misjudgment there by Doyle, but again on number 10's slowness to act, which has just been our theme over the last week or so, and that number 10 knew about the campaigning for Morton from the Sunday Times weeks before proceeding with the peerage and announcing it officially. But the questions are just the same. They're about number 10's slowness to act, how the vetting was working, or why there wasn't more pickup of the real reputational danger to Labour of this coming, of course, after the Mandelson affair. And Doyle having to go around saying his only thoughts are with the victims. And that is a line, personal touch, which is beginning to tire with me in repetition in Labour circles right now, because it seems to be a late breaking awareness of the victims.
So just to be clear, the timeline on this, Morton was charged in 2016. It was the elections in May 2017 that he was suspended from Labour, but ran as an independent, and Doyle campaigned for him in those elections. Sean Morton admitted the charges in November that year. He did release quite an extensive statement yesterday on this. We ought to just go through it. Those of us who took Morton at his word were clearly mistaken. I've never sought to dismiss or diminish the seriousness of the offences for which he was rightly convicted. They are clearly abhorrent, and I've never questioned his conviction. Following his conviction, any contact was extremely limited, and I have not seen or spoken to him in years. Twice I was at events organised by other people which he attended, and once I saw him to check on his welfare, although after concerns were raised by others. So number 10 did an investigation. We know not by who or how, or whether it was very thorough, and then they went ahead with the peerage. It's that business of hear no evil, see no evil when it comes to people that Keir Starmer wants to protect. That's such a toxic charge. And also, number 10 yesterday was again hesitant to do any peerage stripping, which is suddenly in fashion, pointing back to the ongoing internal investigation. But all of a sudden, on Sky to Matt Barbette, Labour chair Anna Turley said that Doyle should be kicked out of the other place, which causes a complication, I think, politically. Now, there's a sense of Keir Starmer clearing the decks with this, just with the McSweeney departure and others. He seems to be all into slightly redefining history. At Political Cabinet yesterday, he started off by saying that nobody had warned him about the welfare rebellion last summer. I mean, that's not my recollection. But as part of this sort of clear out of problematic ideas, things and people, we're about to get a new cabinet secretary. And yesterday you said that Chris Wormold was almost certainly going to be replaced by Antonia Romeo. It looks like you were right. What's about to happen?
Yes, glass cliff edge alert on the theory you raised, Sam, that women get promoted to top jobs when things are being messed up by the men. We have Antonia Romeo, the first female cabinet secretary. She is coming over from Home Office permanent secretary any day now, as soon as Chris Wormold shuffles off, apparently in line for a large payoff, about £250,000, according to the Times. At some point, I guess someone might want to tot up well, all these key appointment messes have cost the Treasury. So Romeo, I've known a lot of years in various roles abroad and at home. Huge change of style to this reclusive era of Chris Wormald, and that sense that there wasn't enough grip and drive. She certainly has that, and that is what Starmer will be banking on. She was very ambitious for this job. I mean, Antonia's ambition has been known in the civil service, I think probably from her first day. There, she's never hidden it, and I think that's also seen as a sort of forward-leaning part of her personality that they want to make use of. She's also part of the answer, isn't she, to the boys' club charge, which is haunting Team Starmer. Definitely the most socially connected of the senior mandates. She was in New York as UN representative. Someone from that time, a minister in the Tory government, saying, very sharp, very analytical, and tells me she absolutely understands how to wield power, and she will do it relentlessly for whoever she serves. She's quite happy to hear that. She likes difficult jobs. I remember her once telling me, and that certainly leaves a gap there for Shabana Mahmood at the Home Office. But if you want a difficult job, I guess number 10 is not a bad place to be starting.
There will be an opportunity for tabloids to rake over her past. But what's interesting, Anne, is that she's really built up a formidable reputation at the top of the civil service. And I'm struck by how many officials that I speak to actually really rate and respect her. So she'll be a controversial choice, but I can see why number 10 have gone for that. Right, handbrake turn. We haven't got that long to do this, but the Labour psychodrama is doing what all of the political psychodramas of the last 11 years have done and squeeze everything to the margins, including stuff that really, really matters. Yesterday, we were talking about special education needs. That's one example of that. But I've got one more big thing for you, Anne.
Yeah, another one.
I was seeing business figures on Tuesday night, and they are really concerned about something that's coming down the track with UK-EU relations, which could absolutely nosedive. Right, what's going on in the EU is that they're considering a massive act of protectionism, partly to deal with the Trump administration, but one that will catch us in the slipstream and really harm our ability to trade with the EU. It's got almost no coverage, say one piece in Bloomberg. While the political class in the UK are talking about things like a customs union, actually, what the business secretary is worrying about, Peter Kyle, is something called the Made in Europe initiative. If pursued by the EU, this would exclude British companies from EU supply chains, from key sectors, and it would totally derail the post-Brexit reset that Keir Starmer has been undertaking and cost firms billions of pounds. It's being driven by France. It's essentially the idea that you promote the use of goods and services produced only within the European Union. Most evident on steel, where they've already done this and jacked up our tariffs on steel, going into the bloc from the UK to 50%. The Commission's proposals for the Industrial Accelerator Act, delayed until later this month, will set further requirements for goods and sectors, sort of green sectors, to be EU made. So this would harm our car industry, our energy industry. Peter Kyle said, I'm deeply worried. And a business is got its head in its hand and can't believe that this has got so little attention as it has.
Made in Europe is a real headache. You're right about that. And if you want to take the European side view of it, it is a very French initiative, very Macron-driven. He tried to get Germany and Italy on board to drive it through, which, as you say, would have been the British government's basic nightmare last week at a meeting in Brussels. Now, that was actually quite generously covered by Politico out of Brussels, I should say that. So I did get brickbats from my colleagues. Merz and Maloney, much less keen. They are still favouring an approach that would seek to jumpstart European industry with a much less protectionist flavour to avoid alienating potential trading and investment partners, including the UK, but not only. And you can tell the intensity of concern about it, which you rightly pick up on, by Peter Kyle, the business secretary, shuttle diplomacy. Yeah, he told Politico in Brussels, for instance, that he was going to go over there to continue the conversation, then keep it going back in London. And he said, I've thrown myself into this. And yes, there are echoes of SAFE. Why? Because that defence procurement plan funding that Britain in the end was edged out of to a large extent because Germany backed the UK, but France won the argument for shutting out post-Brexit Britain. It didn't want that to happen again.
Interesting timing. Rachel Reeves actually going to be talking about closer integration with the EU being the biggest prize at a fireside chat at the LSE later today. I find all of this fascinating. Even if this doesn't go through the EU, the fact that there is a conversation in Europe which would harm us and would involve us being thrown to the wall quite so easily suggests that things like this could come round again soon. That's where we need to wrap it up. We've had the alarm. We're done. Let's see what happens in Prime Minister's Questions. Tomorrow morning, we'll be back. I think the air will be going out of the political system as brief half-term recess looms, but we will be here with full energy to bring you everything you need to know. See you then.
I'll be off to Munich and I will join you from there from the security conference.